Mark Ellison was the kind of detective everyone trusted, calm under pressure, sharp with details, and loyal to his badge. But when he vanished without a trace, leaving behind only his weapon and badge in an abandoned car, the department he served so faithfully was thrown into chaos. What began as a search for a missing officer soon spiraled into the exposure of corruption, betrayal, and secrets powerful enough to destroy an entire police force. The town was known for its calm streets, friendly neighbors, and the kind of peace that made people leave their doors unlocked at night. For years, it had been a place where crime was little more than a rumor, and the police department was viewed as a dependable safeguard rather than a necessity. But one stormy September night shattered that sense of comfort in a way no one could have imagined. The night began with a call to dispatch from a passerby who noticed a car stopped awkwardly along a deserted road that cut through the woods. Rain pounded against the windshield of the responding patrol car as officers pulled up to the scene, their headlights slicing through the darkness. What they found inside the vehicle was enough to change everything. The car's interior told a story no one wanted to hear. The driver's seat was empty, the keys still dangling in the ignition, and the faint metallic scent of blood hung heavy in the air. A dark stain soaked into the fabric, smeared across the steering wheel and dripping faintly onto the floor mats. Yet, there was no sign of the person who had been driving. No footprints leading away in the mud, no phone, no wallet, just silence and the eerie sound of rain. The mystery was immediate and suffocating. Whoever had been in that car had either vanished into the storm or had been taken by force. As word spread through the department, officers who rarely faced more than petty theft or traffic stops found themselves staring at the kind of case that belonged in a much bigger city. The chief ordered a full investigation, and soon, the area was swarming with flashlights, camera flashes, and hushed voices. Neighbors gathered in clusters behind yellow tape, whispering to each other with wide eyes, already spinning theories of what could have happened. For a place so used to safety, fear was a foreign feeling, but it was spreading fast. Reporters from nearby towns arrived the next morning, eager to break the story, and headlines quickly painted the town as the backdrop of something sinister. The department, once proud of its reputation, suddenly felt unprepared. Every officer knew that solving this case wasn't just about finding answers, it was about protecting their community from losing faith in them. Behind closed doors, some admitted to feeling uneasy, as if this was only the beginning of something far larger. The blood in the car was more than evidence. It was a warning, a dark signal that the town's days of quiet innocence were already gone, and something dangerous had just begun. Detective Mark Ellison had been with the department for over a decade, a steady presence in a small force that often leaned on his experience when things became complicated. He was known for his calm approach, his sharp memory, and his ability to read details others overlooked. That's why his absence, just days after the discovery of the blood-filled car, immediately raised alarms. At first, his colleagues assumed exhaustion had gotten the better of him. After all, Mark had been working long shifts, chasing leads that were going nowhere. But when he failed to answer his phone and never returned home, concern began to turn into panic. The search for Mark began quickly. Officers retraced his steps from the previous evening, checking the places he was known to frequent. His apartment was untouched, his bed made, his belongings exactly where they should have been. There was no sign of forced entry, no hint of a struggle. It was as though he had simply stepped out and vanished into thin air. The discovery of his vehicle only deepened the mystery. It was parked on the outskirts of town, near an old warehouse that had long been abandoned and left to decay. Inside the car, his badge and his service weapon were neatly placed on the passenger seat, as if intentionally left behind. Nothing else was disturbed, and the keys were gone. The department, still reeling from the abandoned bloodstained car case, now faced a crisis within its own ranks. Losing a resident or a passerby to foul play was one thing. Losing one of their own was entirely different. Whispers spread quickly through the halls of the station. Some believed Mark had been taken by whoever was connected to the earlier incident. Others wondered if he had staged his own disappearance. The placement of his badge and gun seemed too deliberate, too theatrical to be an accident. The town, meanwhile, spiraled further into fear. If an officer wasn't safe, how could anyone else be? Families began locking doors they had never locked before. Rumors turned into suspicions, and suspicions grew into distrust. The department's confidence fractured, with younger officers questioning whether the danger was external or if it had been hiding within their ranks all along. Every lead the investigators chased ended in another dead end, with no sign of Mark, no ransom demands, and no clear evidence. The disappearance began to feel less like a case they could solve and more like a nightmare they were doomed to live with. The uncertainty hung heavy in the air, pressing on everyone who wore the badge. The search for Detective Mark Ellison grew more desperate with each passing day, and with desperation came scrutiny. Investigators began combing through every detail of his recent work, hoping to find a clue that could explain his disappearance. What they uncovered was not the clean record of a dedicated detective, but a complicated web of secrets that raised more questions than answers. Mark had been assigned to a sensitive undercover case involving drug trafficking that had quietly spread through the town. For years, the department believed they had kept such threats out, but documents in Mark's files showed otherwise. The scale of the operation was larger than anyone had imagined, and the names linked to it were unsettling. Bank statements revealed that Mark had been moving large sums of money in and out of accounts that were not tied to his official pay. Some officers dismissed it as a sign of corruption, suggesting he may have been compromised. Others argued that it was part of his undercover work, a necessary risk to infiltrate the network. The lack of clarity only deepened the divide inside the department. For the first time, trust among colleagues began to fracture. No one knew who was still loyal to their badge and who might be playing both sides. Surveillance footage added to the unease. Just days before his disappearance, Mark had been seen meeting with individuals who were known associates of the very criminals he was supposed to be targeting. The footage captured handshakes, exchanges of envelopes, and long conversations away from public view. Investigators couldn't agree whether he was gathering intelligence or aligning himself with the people he had sworn to bring down. The uncertainty turned him from a missing officer into a suspect in his own case. The town watched the story unfold with growing alarm. Once respected as a figure of integrity, Mark's name became tied to whispers of betrayal and deceit. Neighbors who once praised him now wondered if he had used their trust as a shield for darker dealings. The department found itself at a crossroads, torn between defending one of its own and confronting the possibility that corruption had taken root in its ranks. Each discovery brought them closer to a chilling truth. Whether victim or traitor, Mark Ellison had been walking a dangerous line. And his disappearance was not random. It was the inevitable result of secrets that someone wanted buried, no matter the cost. Weeks of frustration and unanswered questions finally gave way to a breakthrough that would send shockwaves through the entire department. It began with a maintenance worker making a routine inspection of the abandoned warehouse where Mark's car had been discovered. He reported a foul, lingering odor that seemed to seep up from the basement. Investigators rushed to the scene, and with every creak of the rotting wooden steps, the tension grew heavier. When they forced open a rusted metal door, they stepped into a room that looked like a tomb for secrets long hidden. The air was thick, the walls damp, and on the concrete floor lay unmistakable traces of violence. Bloodstains stretched across the surface, dried and darkened by time, and fragments of torn clothing clung to the shadows. The deeper they searched, the worse it became. Scattered belongings pointed directly to Detective Mark Ellison. A watch with his initials engraved on the back, a notebook he carried in his jacket pocket. Even his wallet, emptied of cash but still containing his ID, was shoved carelessly into a corner. To those who had held out hope that Mark was alive, the discoveries cut deep. Yet, the most shocking find was not physical evidence of his suffering, but the contents of a locked metal box wedged beneath a broken shelf. Inside, investigators found files that linked powerful names to a network of illegal dealings. Business leaders, politicians, and even high-ranking officials were tied together in a corruption web that stretched far beyond what anyone had imagined. The documents made one thing chillingly clear. Mark had uncovered the truth, and it was too dangerous for him to share. His disappearance was no random crime, it was calculated. The files suggested that someone within the system, possibly even within the department, had worked to silence him. The realization struck hard. The people sworn to protect justice might have been the very ones dismantling it from within. As word of the warehouse findings spread, the department's reputation crumbled. Officers who had once been proud of their badges now faced suspicion from the very community they served. For some, anger boiled over at the thought that their colleague had been betrayed. For others, Fear set in as they wondered who among them could be trusted. The warehouse had not only revealed evidence of a detective's grim fate but had torn open the fragile fabric holding the department together. What began as a mystery about a missing car and a pool of blood had now spiraled into something far darker, exposing corruption that threatened to destroy everything in its path. The revelations from the warehouse spread like wildfire, igniting panic within the department and outrage across the town. In the days that followed, investigators handed the files over to higher authorities, and the fallout was immediate. Several officers were arrested, accused of manipulating evidence and turning a blind eye to criminal activity. The townspeople who had once waved at patrol cars with trust now looked upon every uniform with suspicion. Mothers pulled their children closer when officers passed, and shopkeepers kept their eyes sharp when patrols entered their stores. The department, once a source of pride, had become a symbol of betrayal. For the officers who remained, the weight was unbearable. They were torn between defending their profession and acknowledging the dark truth that had been uncovered. Many spoke of the shame they felt wearing a badge that no longer represented protection, but corruption. The chief, under mounting pressure, resigned, leaving behind a fractured force with no clear path forward. Internal morale collapsed, and every shift felt heavy with the knowledge that trust, once lost, could not easily be regained. Detective Mark Ellison's fate, however, remained unresolved. Though the evidence at the warehouse strongly suggested his death, no body was ever recovered. This absence of closure kept the wound open, leaving his colleagues and the public to endlessly speculate. Some believed he had been murdered for uncovering the truth. Others whispered that he might still be alive, hidden away, or perhaps complicit in the very crimes he had tried to expose. The uncertainty became part of the tragedy, making it impossible for the town to move on. His name lived in a shadowy space between martyr and suspect, and no official statement could clarify which was true. The scandal reached beyond the borders of the small town. News outlets from across the state seized on the story, turning it into a cautionary tale of power abused and justice ignored. Law enforcement agencies elsewhere distanced themselves, quietly acknowledging that the case had stained the profession as a whole. For the people who lived in the town, the scars remained personal and permanent. The sight of the old warehouse became a chilling reminder of everything they had lost: their sense of safety, their confidence in the system, and the belief that those sworn to protect them were immune to corruption. The tragedy of Detective Mark Ellison and the secrets he unearthed forever changed the department. Trust was shattered, faith was broken, and the shadow of betrayal lingered long after the headlines faded. What began as a single mysterious case had unraveled into a collapse of integrity, ensuring that the town would never see its protectors in the same light again.